Hello, I'm Tommy Moore from the Bartitsu Lab, and in this particular video we're going to be talking about Ghetto Iaido. Now, Iaido is the Japanese art of being able to draw and strike at a moment's notice when you feel a threat arises. So again, samurai will be going around, and in theory you'd have his mental awareness about him. So if we talk about modern systems, that samurai is going around in code yellow, he spots some shit from orange, by the time it goes red, he's drawn with a stroke, done the business he needs to, put it away and fucked off. Okay, now looking at Ghetto Iaido is how do we, if we are carrying a weapon, or indeed how do we, if we're making sure we're mentally safeguarded against this being done to us, how do draws and attacks work, and what to expect and what to do from different angles. So I call this Ghetto Iaido, how to practice being able to draw, hit and fuck off as fast as possible. So I'm going to talk through some of the ways we approach it at the Bartitsu Lab. So the first thing is understanding what angles naturally manifest from where the weapon is hid. I've done a video recently about the weapon already being in situ. So let's say I've got the weapon already, and I've tucked it under the arms, or I've cupped it and so on. So if you've already got the weapon out, just fucking deploy it. Just fucking deploy it as per that video and anything else you might see. You also need to get used to, if you haven't had the wherewithal to pull that weapon, or indeed the person you're facing has yet to pull that weapon, understanding how it's done and what the likely angles are going to be. And I'll talk through some of the most common ones, or the most common ones that we've experimented with and played with. So the first one is understanding that anything that comes from a same side draw. So if you're right-handed, anything that comes from a right pocket here, or a right trouser pocket, anything that's on this side, or indeed for a left-handed person, this side, will typically come from a diagonal axis. So if I pull, so let's say I pull from my right trouser pocket, and I pull this, okay? My first shot will be, whoa! Oh, fuck's sake. So let's say the first shot is me pulling this mini truncheon from my pocket. So from my right hand side, same side draw, I will draw and deploy. So as you can see, pretty quickly, you've deployed a small and very powerful truncheon. Just collapsing it there for you. So from the same side, you can often expect a right-handed forehand or a dominant shank inwards. Okay, so from the right side, you can expect diagonal blows and get used to be able to deploy them, or indeed, if there's a knife in play, someone pull and it brings straight to point. Think of it like point shooting. Come from here, it's already in deployment. The weapon is already in deployment, it's already on target. So from a right-handed same side, you're going to have to expect a four-handed blow or a thrust. And these are the two things you need to be most cognizant to safeguard yourself against, and also be best at doing, being able to pull and thrust or pull and strike. These are the two angles that make the most sense in this piece of Ghetto Iaido. So pull and thrust, or pull and forehand strike. And whether you've got a kosh or a blade, it doesn't really matter. These are the conventions to draw and deploy. And whether that's in a jacket pocket or a trouser pocket, or indeed a back pocket on the same side, these things manifest. Thrust forward, forehand strike. Thrust forward, forehand strike. So that you need to be ready for, and you need to be able to get good at doing them. Off a cross draw or a cross deployment, again, this can be, again, very, very common, is something from an inner lapel. So an inner lapel, so this one's quite low on my jacket, some of them could be as high as here, but you've got this. Now in reality, you can only really expect a backhanded cut or strike with this. So again, if it's coming from cross trouser or cross inner lapel, 9 times out of 10 is going to be this angle here. So if you imagine if I do it with the kosh, I'm going to pull from here, whoa, and it strikes out. Not many people will have the wherewithal or the skill or the inclination to pull and do some type of inverted thrust. That is more of a trained maneuver, and if you're fighting someone that's trained, you're really fucked. But if it's coming from a cross draw, whether it's from a pocket or an inner jacket space, it will often come off this angle. So again, when you're practicing, get used to being able to quickly access and strike out, quickly access and strike out. So, same side, forehand or thrust, whether it's the back pocket, the trouser pocket, or the inner jacket here. If it's a cross, typically it can only be a diagonal down. If it's a horizontal, horizontals are quite awkward to get off a draw strike. The only difference might be is if from the draw strike it's coming from the sleeve. So if it's coming from the sleeve, in that instance, if it's coming from the sleeve, then often you can get a horizontal. So if you see any sleeve to sleeve, prepare yourself for something that comes on a horizontal plane. And again, that's something you can practice. So if your habit or your preference is to have something here and to have your guard there and to chap through, and you need to deploy your weapon, you've got your sleeve access here, and often it will come across a horizontal plane, whether that's a blade or whether that's a kosh or a baton, doesn't really matter. Anything that's sleeve to sleeve will often be a backhand horizontal. Bear in mind that when people go sleeve to sleeve, you don't really know if the weapon is up their right sleeve or their left sleeve, or they're right-handed or they're left-handed. So do bear in mind that whilst you know it's more than likely to come across a horizontal axis, from which hand really depends on where they've stored it or where you've stored that particular weapon. So up the sleeve, sleeve to sleeve grip, typically that comes across horizontal plane. Okay, if it comes from an appendix or a front or a Mexican holster style, so if it comes from a waistband here, so one of the main things, again, if we're talking Ghetto Iaido and you're doing this, one of the main things is get used to styles of draw, and there are many styles and many pros and cons. I prefer the thumb, so I use the thumb. The thumb raises my garment, allowing me to draw the weapon. Whether I go for a four-handed grip or an ice pick grip, the thumb clears as the hand grabs the weapon. No matter what they do from this front portion here, if it's from the side, it follows the same methodology as if it comes from the pocket. So if it's on this side, it will often be a diagonal forehand or a thrust. If it comes from this side, it will likely be a backhand diagonal. Okay, so if it's more to the left or to the right, the previous principles apply. If it comes from the center of mass, and typically this is more blades than bludgeons, one, you need to get good at being able to draw and get it into play, and draw and be able to strike fluidly. So draw and thrust, draw and thrust. That's one thing you need to be aware of and get proficient in. But also, if it's something that's going to be used against you, bear in mind that things that come from a center of mass tend to come out in the center of mass. So whether it's a forehand pluck or an ice pick butt pluck, often it will come out, and the most efficient thing to do will be to plunge it directly into you. So if it comes straight from center, be ready for a short, sharp, direct thrust with that weapon, and more than likely it's going to be a blade as opposed to a bludgeon. Bludgeons are typically held in a cross or a same side position. So just to recap, Ghetto Iaido is the funny fine art of being able to draw your weapon from wherever you most likely keep it, or most likely find it, or most likely hide it due to artifice, to use it in a situation such as self-defense. Things to be aware of: that anything comes where the hand draws from the same side, it will typically be something that goes across the body diagonally, or it will be a direct thrust at you. If it comes across, typically this will be a backhand diagonal, depending on whether it comes from the high pocket or the low pocket. It will be 9 times out of 10 a backhand diagonal. Thrusts very rarely manifest from this particular quadrant of you. If it comes from the center, then likely it will be used to thrust into you, and more than likely it will be a blade over a bludgeon. So again, get used to your favorite draw type, how to move your garments out of the way. I prefer the thumb tuck the thumb under, draw, but even if it's used against you, typically it comes from center of mass to your center of mass. And indeed, if there is a sleeve to sleeve, very often it will come out at a horizontal plane, but be aware that it can come from either hand depending on where they've decided to situate their weapon. So these are some of the things that A, you should practice being able to draw from different ways, even if every day the thing that you carry for self-defense, if you choose to do so, is always in the right pocket. Imagine a scenario where you're under duress and you've managed to sneak something away. A pen, a knife. Let's imagine it's a home invasion, you've managed to get a knife in here. You need to be able to get good at drawing from all the different places, even if it's not your preferred situation to hide it. So get used to being able to draw from crossbody, same side, from an appendix carry, or from behind. Get used to being able to do all of those things, should you need to. Get used to be able to do them quickly, and make sure that the draw and strike, just like traditional Iaido, is instantaneous. You draw and you hit, you draw and you hit. There is no gap between drawing and hitting. The draw and the hit are one and the same. So those are if you're planning to use it and practice it and get good at it and use it with force, and make sure there is no gap. After that first draw and hit, you continue to belabor that individual. So once you've got that first blow, often they're not critical finishing blows. It's not a sword. So again, bang, minimize the gap between the first bang and the following 20 bangs. And also, as a quick reminder, be wary of where people put their hands and where they might draw things from. So if you see a suspicious individual and he puts his hand here, have in your mind it's very likely that a diagonal is coming off this line. If the individual is putting it on this side, it's very, very likely that a thrust or a forehand is coming. So using that, you can predict the future just a little, so you can understand, are you going to foul his draw? Are you going to move? Are you going to flank? Are you going to smash in? Are you going to escape out? Once you've clocked where the hand is going, you can reasonably predict the angle of attack that's going to come against you. So I would say of all the things about thinking about Ghetto Iaido, just for a laugh, the main thing is, as soon as you clock where a hand is, you can make a good, reasonable assumption as to what's going to come out. And from that, you can make a good, reasoned and logical decision about what you're going to do about it. It's not foolproof, nothing is, but it gives you a good, sound, logical conclusion as to what your next move, maneuver, escape, avoidance, escalation, armament will be to avoid that likely outcome. From sleeve to sleeve, from same side, from crossbody or centre of mass, you know what you can do. So some things to play with, again, think about it, explore with it, play with it, see if it comes out differently for you, but it's something that I've been playing a lot with, formulating my curriculum for next year.